Right, we're back. And since we finished the last video, you can see that I have painted in the wings de-icing boots. Everything's cured up. We have the undercarriage on, just to save the paint getting scrubbed off on the underside. And we're ready for decals. Now, Revell decals, these ones are printed in Italy, so I'm assuming they're cartographed, so we're quite confident they'll be okay. We don't have too many of them either. We've just got the main markings here, and then we've got some fuel tank decals, and then we've got the upper wing roundels, the fuselage roundels, the tail flashes, and then we've got the de-icing boots for the vertical stabilizers. Now, I could have painted them, but I thought I would just use the decals. I've never had a problem with Revell decals, so I'm assuming that I'm hoping they're going to go down okay. So, what do I use? Well, there's two options I use. I can either use MkII and MkII as a decal softener and setter, or what I have been using quite recently and I quite like is Mr. Hobby's Mark Softener and Mark Setter. So the setter goes on first and then the softener goes on second. I have some clean water in a takeaway food tray that's obviously been washed, so it's got no grease or anything in it that would destroy the decal. A clean brush that I use solely for decals. It doesn't get used for anything else. So I avoid any cross-contamination. And then obviously cotton buds or Q-tips and a little bit of paper towel. So I think what we'll do is we'll go for the overwing roundels first. Now when I put them in the water, always decal side down first, get them straight in there. I have the lid handy. Once it's had a good soak, out it comes, and I lay it on the lid and just let it rest so that the adhesive can soften up and the decal can become movable. Now make sure you've got yourself a good pair of pointed tweezers, just for touching the decals in and moving them about. Doesn't take just too long. You get folks saying, oh, it takes 10 seconds to soften them up. I've found that it really just depends on the decal as to how quickly they soften up. So don't rush this process, just take your time. Now what we do need to do is, you can see here, orientate the aircraft, your model, to the same orientation as on the kit plans, and that's purely to help you figure out where you want the decals or where they need to go and sit. I'll just pop these side decals in to the water and let them soften up. Right, you need to, when you're decaling, make sure that your paint and your varnishes are fully cured. Now this has been sitting for a couple of days since we last looked at it, and I'm quite happy that the decals are dry, the varnish is dry, and the setting solutions should be safe to use. They can be a little aggressive on certainly acrylic paints, and if you go heavy-handed you could end up dissolving or reactivating the paint and causing yourself a whole world of problems. So you want to roughly figure out where the decal's going in, and then just brush the setter over the surface of the model where you're confident the roundel's going to go. Gently manipulate it These ones are taking a little moment to come off the backing paper, which doesn't surprise me. And the beauty with putting the setter on is it will give you a bit of a area guide where you're going to move the decal to. Right, so you can just see the decal is starting to slide off the paper. Now what I like to do is I like just to gently remove the decal from the paper with tweezers, and then that gives me a little bit more precision when I'm placing it down. You can see on the instructions that the decal sits reasonably close to the aileron and just the corner of that access panel. Now, before I start smoothing that down, I'm actually going to go and put on this side's decal, and then we'll make sure that they are even with one another and we're getting the placing right. Now, it's one thing that I know, especially if you go into competition with your models, the judges will pay particular attention to decal placement, for making sure that they're in the correct place. It's very, very important if you want to compete. It's certainly something I don't do, purely because there are no competitions in and around where I live, but there's no harm in trying to be precise. So get the decals on, and then with the Mark I eyeball, just look them up and down to see that you're happy they're in the same or near location. I think this one needs to go forward a little bit. Now with the tweezers you can tweak them. You can move them sometimes with a brush. You can get the brush under the back edge. Certainly if you need to lift them, the brush should be able to go underneath them. And these decals seem to be taking a good grip of the surface of the model. When you're happy with the placement, you want to come out with a cotton bud, slightly moist, and then roll out from the center out the ways, and roll the fluid out to get the decal to start adhesion to the model. And the same on this side. Check again before we're 100% committed. Okay. When we're happy, get the softener. And you don't need lots. Just the modest amount will do. Nice covering over it. And then leave the decal be. Don't touch it. Because if you touch it, you run the risk of damaging it. What we can do though is just gently go around the outside of the decal to remove any excess from the paint. Now you can see there is discoloration of the paint here. When that dries, that should dry back fine. Right, next job is to look at the fuselage decals. So the roundels are nicely soaked, so what we can do is think about one side at a time. We'll prepare the decals for that side. So we're doing an aircraft from 21 Squadron, RAF Methwold, England, May 1943. So the aircraft identifier is Hotel Yankee Kilo, and the aircraft serial number is Alpha Echo 692. So we get the code numbers soaking in the water for when we're ready if we get the roundel on. So looking at the instructions, go. We can see the placement of the roundel, so let's orientate the aircraft and get an idea roughly where that roundel sits. So it's reasonably close to this window, and it crests that panel line there. So again, we'll come in here, we'll give ourselves a little bit of area of interest, draw a circle with a brush. And there's our guide marker where we want the first part of the roundel. Now these roundels come in two parts. I believe that is down to copyright law, because the RAF have copyrighted this roundel. Okay, move it into position, tap into position. So looking at the instructions, this panel line here cuts halfway through the yellow outer, and there's to be a little bit of space between this panel line and the yellow outer. So we'll move it along a little bit till we're happy. It doesn't sit square underneath the turret, it's slightly off to the rear, and I'm quite happy with that position. So keep it in position. We'll just roll out any air bubbles, any excess fluid, clear the sides away. Now we need to put the red dot in the center, so we'll have to treat the top of the decal. It won't hurt if you cover the whole decal. That'll just help to soften it a little. Clear the edges. And then we'll recover the red dot off the decal paper. This is where using tweezers helps. Gives you a certain element of control. And we want to make sure that that is dead center. Take your time. And then very gently roll over the decal. Check. When you're satisfied, we'll go in for the softer. Very gently brush over the decal. You don't want to move the second part of it. You just want it to conform and bond together. So that's that side decal done. We can check the code letters to see if they're moving. Now if they don't move easily on the backing paper, give them another soak in the water, just to avoid any tearing. The last thing you want to do is tear a decal. Now I'm a bit wary about these code letters because I think they've got quite a lot of carrier film. There is no harm in trimming around the code letters to remove as much carrier film as possible. That is very doable. It's not something I usually do because I can usually manage to get these things down without getting silver in, and there are things you can do if you do get a touch of silver in. Right, we're looking at the second side here, looking at the instructions. The panel lines are different, but they can still act as a guide. This panel line is constant, so we know it's got to be a rough distance from this panel line, same distance as it is on the other side. We also know the white is just going to crest this line here. So we'll draw our circle. We'll get the decal. peeling the decal off the paper, take your time. Okay, what you can do, I'll have to take it off camera to do it, just use your eyeball and look down on the decal from above and look up from below to see that you're happy you've got them evenly spaced on the airframe. If you need to move it a little, just move it until you're satisfied it's in the right position for you. You can also look along the airframe and see that it's at the same height. Now if you're satisfied with the decal positioning, again, I'll give it a little roll, back in with the setter, paint the center, and place. And you can see quite easily when they're not in position. It's very easy to move it when to the right position. But keep checking, keep looking, little adjustments. Only when you're satisfied, come in and roll over the decal, sealing it down. Go. Now the human eye, especially when you practice and you've done a few of these, gets very used to positioning intricate items. So trust in your eye to get it right. Right, there we go. So there's the 4 roundels. We can move on to the code letters now. Now hopefully they are starting to release. Yes, they are. They're starting to release from the backing film, and they are individual as well, which is really good. So that's minimizing the carrier film somewhat. Right, so go back around to the first side. Look in here. So we've got the K on first. Again, look at where the panel lines are in relation to where you're lining up the decal to. That will aid you greatly. So just support the aircraft in a comfortable position. Paint on the setter. So not only will this help bond to the model surface, but it gives you a little bit of slippage, so you can maneuver the decal into place. Now with the greatest of care, you want to lift this decal up and then bring it over to the kit, and you want to do your very best to get it into position straight away. That's not going to work the way I'm doing it, so put the decal back down onto the backing paper, reposition and start again, constantly referring to your instructions for positioning, and the more accurately you can place the decal, the easier it is to get them on the aircraft and position them. Use the panel lines as guides. When you're satisfied, we'll start to fasten it down. Right. So with the moist Q-tip, very, very gently roll over the decal to work any moisture and trapped air bubbles out from underneath. Rolling action, not rubbing. And when we're satisfied that it is down, we'll give it a little paint of solution. Don't flood the area. As I said, these solutions are designed to soften the decals and the carrier film, so they will eat into it and can cause a bit of damage to your paint if you go overboard. So I think that you've probably seen enough of how I do decaling. I am gonna just pause now. I'll do the rest of them off camera and we'll come back and have a look once it's done. Right, we're back, and that is the decaling all done. What I've done is we've let it sit overnight, the decaling solution to work, and these decals have performed really, really well. If I can tilt this over, I think you can see, focus on the aircraft and not the mat. There we go. So you should be able to see that the decals have conformed beautifully to all the panel lines and all the raised detail. Certainly the roundels on the wing have conformed to the panel lines, and I'm really, really impressed with how these decals have turned out. The decals on the vertical stabilizers have also performed really well. Got them settled down and then just went over the leading edge with some Tamiya XF85 rubber black, just to blend any open areas of paint that where the decals hadn't joined together to complete the de-icing boot. I have gone over the decals with some thinned down Tamiya X35 semi-gloss clear just to seal them in, and we're going to let them cure up now before we start going straight into the oil weathering process. Now, some people like to weather on a fully matte surface to get the adhesion for the oils to the paint. I'm going for the semi-gloss surface for two reasons. A, it gives me the opportunity to use pin washes to highlight all the panel lines, get them tidied up, let it dry off, and then come back in to do any modulation and color weathering on the surfaces. And B, if you use a matte finish, it is a lot harder. Not a lot harder, but you have to work a lot harder to work the oil paint or enamel paint, because it obviously bonds really, really well with a matte finish. So semi-gloss is the way to go. Another thing to bear in mind is that these aircraft, although they were painted matte paint does actually burnish up the more it's been clambered over, weathering, and it will get that semi-gloss satin type finish on it. So we are going for a weathered look. You can see that with the post shading modulation colouring on the aircraft. So that sort of semi-gloss finish will give us the tonal variation we need, depending on which way you're looking at the aircraft and the lights bouncing back up off it to the viewer. So there we are. So that's us at a point now. We're going to leave this set for probably 24 hours before I start oil painting. Make sure it's fully cured up. We've got all the wheel bay covers done. We've got the bomb bay doors done. It's all ready for its initial pin wash, and then final color modulation. Just off screen here, I've got the bombs painted up. So they were painted matte black and then just a dust over with NATO green. We're going to give them a dirty coat. We're going to paint on the yellow HE markings and then give them some grime wash from the oil just to mucky them up a bit. And then we've also got the propellers painted in semi-gloss black. They've come up really nicely. So we'll get the tips masked, painted white, and then the yellow warning markings on the end. The hubs need to be painted a little bit of metal, but we are actually getting very, very close to getting this aircraft completed and brought together. So in the next episode, we'll look at oil weathering, and then one after that will be final construction and completion, and then we'll look at the final review. So thanks, guys. If you got any questions, pop them down below, and if you like what you're seeing, then please consider giving me thumbs up and a subscribe. Until next time, happy modeling. Take care.